Prabhupada. Materialistic life is based on sex life. The existence of all the materialistic people who are undergoing severe tribulations in the struggle for existence is based on sex. Therefore, in the Vedic civilization, sex life is allowed only in a restricted way. It is for the married couple and only for begetting children. But when sex life is indulged in for sense gratification, illegally and illicitly, both the man and the woman await severe punishment in this world or after death. In this world also, they are punished by virulent diseases like syphilis and gonorrhea. And in the next life, as we see in this passage of Srimad-Bhagavatam, they are put into different kinds of hellish conditions to suffer. In Bhagavad Gita, first chapter, illicit sex life is also very much condemned. And it is said that one who produces children by illicit sex life is sent to hell. It is confirmed here in the Bhagavatam that such offenders are put into hellish conditions of life in Tamisra, Andatamisra, and Raurava. So we are seeing in this chapter Lord Kapila explaining to his mother about what happens to a conditioned soul who indulges in sense gratification all his life. And in today's verses, Lord Kapila is describing about the hellish planets and what awaits a sinful conditioned soul. There was very close description of the life of a conditioned soul, how he nears death, and post-death, what happens to him. All of that is being described. And how in some of the hellish planets, his entrails are pulled out by hounds and vultures. And he is still alive to see it, jivitaha, because he does not have a gross body there. If the gross body is there, if you pull the entrails, the person will die. That doesn't serve the purpose. That was explained in an earlier verse by Kapila Deva. So he's given a body, of subtle body, which has all of these features, and he can experience all of these kinds of painful situation. His limbs are lopped off, torn asunder by elephants, hurled down from hilltops, and held captive in water or in caves. And particularly in today's verse, the last one, Lord Kapila is describing the effects of illicit and illegal sex life. Yastamisra andatamisra rauravadyascha yatanaha bhunkte. He has to undergo who? Narova nariva, both the man and the woman. Mita sangena nirmitaha. So together, what they consider to be enjoyment and what awaits them is Tamisra, Andatamisra, and Raurava. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada has explained that materialistic life is all about sex life. So very strong statements about the effects of sinful activities, what a conditioned soul has to go through. Quite scary hearing all of this in the Bhagavatam about the hellish conditions. And what is very striking is that even though living entities know about it or hear about it, somehow, sometimes the living entities still indulge in sinful activities. Why does that happen? What forces or impels someone to commit sinful activities, even if one is aware of what are the hellish conditions of life, painful conditions of life one has to go through? Actually, this question comes up in the Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna asks exactly this question, and what follows is a very interesting description in the Bhagavad Gita towards the end of the 3rd chapter. Arjuna's question is particularly this: Atha kena prayuktoyam papam charati purushaha. What impels a living entity to commit papam charati purushaha kena prayuktoyam? And Arjuna's question is, anichannapi varshneya baladiva niyojitaha. The conditioned soul is engaged in baladiva, very forcefully, even though he doesn't want. Anichannapi varshneya baladiva niyojitaha. So what is it that is forcing him, forcing a living entity to commit sinful activities? Even though he knows it is not right, he does not want to do it, but still he indulges in. What follows after this question that Arjuna has asked to till the end of the chapter is something like an anatomy of karma. Krishna explains, yes, that force which indulges a sinful act, impels a conditioned soul in sinful activities is karma. Kama esha krodha esha rajoguna samudbhavaha mahashano mahapapma vidhyenam iha vairinam. So if we read these verses till the end of the chapter, about 7 or 8, 37 to text number 43. So 7 verses. We see how karma works, how karma is structured, what is the nature of karma, what is its effect, what it does, how does it arise. A very elaborate explanation so that we understand how to deal with this. And Krishna also explains how to deal with this. So Lord begins to explain that what impels a living entity to commit sin is his karma. Karma is the lustful desire. And in the purport to this first verse, Kama esha krodha eshu rajoguna samudbhavaha, Prabhupada points out the original love of Krishna, which is a characteristic of the living entity, is transformed into lust. So, some of the attributes of the soul is eternal, the soul is conscious, the soul is a person, soul has freedom. These are all the attributes of the soul. Another fundamental attribute of the soul is that the soul has love for Krishna. Why is it so? Because Prabhupada explains here that the living entities are made constitutionally for Krishna's enjoyment. Prabhupada elsewhere also often quoted a verse from the Upanishad, Eko Bahushyama. The Lord was one, but He became many in the form of the living entities for His pleasure. Akamayata. Eko akamayata bahushyama. The Lord, when He desired to enjoy, He became many. So that's why you find a very interesting expression by Srila Prabhupada. Usually we hear this expression, the living entities are part and parcel of the Lord. Prabhupada here explains the living entities are part and parcel of the ever-increasing spiritual bliss of the Lord. So in other words, we are made for giving Krishna pleasure. But Prabhupada clarifies, when we say we give pleasure to Krishna, and what do we get in return? Suffering? No. We also get our pleasure. So Krishna is the primary enjoyer and we are the enjoyed. And being enjoyed, we get our pleasure. That's our constitutional position. So we are meant for His pleasure, and hence we have love of Krishna. But that love of Krishna gets transformed into lust. Just like there is a white bulb, if I wrap a filter around it, a green filter, the white light becomes green light. It's not some other light. It's actually the original white light which has become green, in touch with the green filter. In the same way, the living entity is pure, has pure love of God. But that love of God in touch with material existence, rajoguna samudbhavaha, it becomes lust. And then Krishna explains, Mahashano Mahapapma. This is a Mahashana, it's a devouring force. It's an all-devouring force. Kama is very forceful. Mahapapma engages the living entity in sin. Vidyenam iha vairinam. And that lust is the greatest enemy of the living entity. And then Krishna explains, Dhumena avriyate vakhnir. There are 3 degrees in which this kama covers the living entity, like smoke covering fire, or dust covering mirror, and like the womb covering the fetus. And in the next verse, Krishna explains, Avritam gnanamethena gnanino nitya vairina kama rupena kaunteya dushpurena nalena cha. So the effect of kama is that it covers up the living entity's true knowledge. The true knowledge is love of God. That's the pure knowledge of the living entity. Avritam gnanamethena gnanino nitya vairina is the eternal enemy. It covers up that knowledge. Kama rupena kaunteya dushpurena nalena. And this kama is insatiable. Not that you indulge in kama and then the kama will become pacified and then it will not come up again. So it is dushpurena. Purena means purna, means complete satisfaction. No, this is dushpurena. And in the next verse, Krishna explains, where does this kama sit? That's why, this is a very, very interesting anatomy of kama. How the kama works, what it does. Then Krishna is explaining, Indriyani mano buddhi rasyadhishtana muchyate. This kama sits in 3 places. Indriyani, manaha, and buddhihi. So our senses are the sitting places, our mind is the sitting place of kama, and intelligence is the sitting place of kama. In this way, kama sits in these 3 places, ethair vimohayatyesha, and bewilders the living entity. Esha gnanam avritya dehinam. How does it bewilder? By covering the true knowledge of the living entity, it bewilders. After this, Krishna explains, so how to deal with this kama. Tasmat tvam indriyanyado niyamya bharatarshabha. How do we deal with this kama? By indriya niyama, by control of the senses. So, tasmatram indriyanyadav niyamya bharatarshabha papmanam prajahyenam jnana vijnana nashanam. Again, Krishna is using, Prabhupada explains that because Arjuna was a warrior, Krishna is using warrior-like terms. You can destroy, you can kill this enemy. Who is this enemy? And you should kill this enemy, conquer this enemy. Papmanam prajahyenam jnana vijnana nashanam. And kama destroys jnana and vijnana. It destroys knowledge and realization. So, any spiritual advancement we make and any realization we have, an indulgence in kama will destroy all of that. So, niyamya. That's why in the Vedic culture, niyama, indriya nigraha is required. And that is the only way, that is the way to control this lust. Because indulgence, dushpurena analena cha, it's like a fire, all devouring fire. So, how does this indriya niyama work? That is explained by, we'll come back to this in Krishna's description. Indriya niyama means the force of the senses may be there, the force of the mind may be there, because kama creates that force. Even though the force is there, one has to learn to tolerate that force. That is the indriya niyama. And if we tolerate that force, it will go away. That's the trick that Shastras describe. And Prahalad Maharaj talks about this, especially sex. And he says, Kandutivan manasijam vishaheta dhira. How does one overcome this one? The lust, especially of sex desire. Prahalad's answer is Kandutivan. Kanduti is like an itching sensation. So sex desire is like an itching sensation. And when you get an itch, when you have some boil and some itch or something in your body, it creates an itching sensation. And if you scratch, then you're going to aggravate the problem. So, what is recommended when that itching sensation is there? You just tolerate. That's called vishaheta. Vishaheta. Vishaheta means to tolerate that itching sensation. And to tolerate that itching sensation, one has to be a dhira. Dhira means one who is not affected even in the presence of a provocation. That is a dhira. So, Kandutivan manasijam vishaheta dhira. So, this expression vishaheta dhira, one should tolerate and become a dhira, is the recommendation of Prahalad Maharaj. And the same principle Rupa Goswami explains in the first verse of the Upadeshamrita, where he is describing, Rupa Goswami is describing this body has many urges, natural forces, and etan yo vishaheta dhiran sarvam api mam prithvim sashishyat. So Rupa Goswami says this body has vacho vega, udharo pasta vega, manaso vega, krodha vega. All of these urges are there in this body. Etan vegan yo vishaheta dhira. If one can tolerate these urges, such a person is eligible to create disciples all over the world. So that's the qualification Rupa Goswami is setting forth for a spiritual master in the very first verse of the Upadeshamrita. Actually, Prabhupada explains many places that it's a spiritual concept. It is a spiritual experience. How to feel the association of Krishna. Prabhupada explains, it is not that Krishna is gone 5,000 years ago. If we live by his instructions, we can have his association. If our life is governed by Krishna's instruction, every moment we are leading our life on the basis of the principles given by Krishna, instructions given by Krishna, the foundation of our life is Krishna's instruction, then we can have the association of Krishna, because one is constantly remembering everything he does in his life. He accepts some things, rejects something, performs something, thinks in a certain way, desires in a certain way. Everything is according to the instructions of Krishna. That is Krishna Sangha. And that is true about if we live a life by the instructions of Prahalad Maharaj, we can experience the association of great Bhagavatas. If we live by the instruction of Rupa Goswami, we can experience his association. In the same way, Guru's instruction. That is why the instruction is Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chittete Korya Aikya. The spiritual master, his instructions, Chittete Aikya, means it is made one with our consciousness. Means what? It's an expression, it's a poetic expression. It means we live by, we think by, we desire by the instructions of the spiritual master. And that is an association. And Srila Prabhupada many times, he said that I never felt the separation. I never felt that I am separated from my spiritual master, because I always live by his instruction. I'm always serving his mission. So, Indriya Niyama is a very important principle. Krishna is saying that. And how do we do that Indriya Niyama? Because Indriyas come with force. Indriyas actually don't come with force. It is the lust when it is sitting in Indriya that brings the force. So if the Indriyas are not affected by lust, then it is compared to a snake whose fangs have been removed. It could be a cobra. If the fangs are removed and the poison glands are removed, then you can play with the cobra. A child can play with the cobra. No fear at all. Because the poison fangs have been removed. In the same way, that poison fang, lust, is freed from this system, body, mind, intelligence system, then we do not have to fear at all. So we have to live in the beginning. A sadhaka has to go through this phase of Vishaheta Dhira. The force may be there, but one must just tolerate, and it will go away. This is the instruction of the Shastras and the Acharyas. The force will go. And Prabhupada gives another example. Even hunger is like that. Sometimes we feel hunger pangs, like sometimes in the morning when we are chanting, we feel hunger pangs, but we know till 9:30 you won't get prasadam. You just tolerate. And then after some time the hunger pangs will go away. This is the principle. That is why Indriya Niyama is essential. And if Indriya Niyama is not there, if lust rules our life, if lust governs our thinking, our actions, our desires, then Jnana Vijnana Nashanam, Etair Vimohayatyesha, one will be bewildered. And one's all knowledge and realization will be lost. So, after saying all of this, because Krishna described the lust resides. Indriyani manobuddhir asyadishtanam uchyate. It resides in adhisthana, means residing. Where is it? Where can we find this enemy? It rests in indriya, manas and buddhi. Next, Krishna is further giving directions. Indriyani paranyahur indriyebhyo param manaha manasastu para buddhir yo buddhe paratastu saha. So indriyani paranyahur, if you translate this indriyani paranyahu, if you simply translate that, ahuhu means it is said. Indriyani paranyahur, it is said that the indriyas are superior. It clearly doesn't say, Krishna is not saying superior to what? So Prabhupada translates that as the working senses are superior to dull matter. And in the purport, Prabhupada explains, the senses are the most important aspects of this body. Right? It is through the senses that we act. We desire, we act. All of this, we create a conception. All of this is happening through the senses. The senses are the most important thing in this body. And that is why Krishna is saying the senses are superior to the body. That's the meaning. Indriyani paranyahur. The senses are different outlets for the activities of lust. Lust is reserved within this body, but it is given vent through the senses. Therefore, the senses are superior to the body as a whole. The senses are superior to the body as a whole. That's the meaning of Indriyani paranyahur. Indriyebhyo param manaha. Something that is superior to the senses is the mind. And manasastu para buddhir, and superior to the mind is intelligence. Yo buddhe paratastu saha, and superior to the intelligence is saha, that he, and that he refers to the soul. So Krishna is creating a hierarchy here. The lowest is the body, then the senses, then the mind, and then the intelligence, and then the soul. So this is how Krishna has created the hierarchy. In the last verse, which is the concluding verse, Krishna says, Evam buddhe param buddhva samstabhyatmanam atmana jahishatrum mahabaho kama rupa durasadam. Once again Krishna is coming back to kama rupa durasadam. This kama is a formidable enemy of the living entity. Durasadam jahishatrum mahabaho. Again Krishna is inspiring very kshatriya words. Mahabaho, you are mighty armed. You jahi shatrum, this enemy you conquer. How? Evam buddhe param buddhva samstabhyatmanam atmanam. Evam, in this way, buddhe param buddhva. Buddhva means knowing. Buddhva, knowing what? Evam buddhe param buddhva, knowing that the soul is superior to the intelligence. In fact, the soul is superior to the intelligence, the mind, and the senses. Right? So, knowing this, evam buddhe param buddhva. So, it is buddhe param buddhva. Knowing that, so thus knowing oneself, the soul, to be transcendental to the material senses, mind and intelligence. Knowing this. And knowing this how? Samstabhyatmanam atmana. If we see this word samstabhya, samstabhya means stabhya. It related to the word stambha. We know stambha means a column or a pillar. And what is special about a column or a pillar like we have in this room, in this hall? Unshakable. Isn't it? That's the quality of a pillar. Unshakable. Steadiness. That's why samsthabhya means completely unshakable. So, samsthabhya atmanam atmana. Atma means the self. If you simply translate this expression, samsthabhya atmanam atmanam, atmanam atmana, it means one should control or one should steady the self by the self. So, this is simply what it means. Samsthabhya atmanam atmana. Atmanam atmana samstabhyam. You should steady the self by the self. So what does that mean? So Prabhupada translates, one should control the lower self by the higher self. So one should control all of them are in the Vedic language. The word Atma can be used all of these things, because Atma means a sense of identity. And the sense of identity we can feel the sense of identity in terms of our body. So Atma can refer to the body. We can feel the sense of identity in terms of our senses, in terms of our mind. Sometimes we feel, oh, I'm so pained by that. Actually, that pain is an emotion. It's an experience. It is what is going on at the mental level. But we identify with the mind and we feel, I am pained. So my identity sometimes I express through the mind. Sometimes through the body. I am hungry. The pangs are being felt by the stomach. It's a physiological effect. But we identify with the body and we feel I am hungry. I'm feeling the pang. That's why the word Atma, self, can mean the body, can mean the mind, can mean the intelligence, can mean ultimately the soul, because the ultimate identity is at the soul level, because we will cast this body and move on. Tata dehantara praptihi. So our identity was not really at the bodily level. It's not even at the mind. It's not at the intelligence. Suppose we solve a problem. We are together. We are trying to break the problem. And then I give an idea. Oh, and everyone says, oh, such a brilliant idea you gave. You're so sharp. Your intelligence is so sharp. Then I feel very good about it. Because I'm identifying that intelligence is mine. So our identity can rest at the level of the body, mind, intelligence, and ultimately it rests at the level of the soul. So, samsthabhyatmanam atmana, one should control the lower self by the higher self. One should control the body, senses, with the higher self, with the mind. One should control the mind by the higher self, the intelligence. One should control the intelligence by the higher self, which is the soul. That is what Krishna is saying. So one, samsthabhyatmanam atmana, and control steadily, samsthabhya, not faintly, weakly, reversibly. Sometimes I control, sometimes I get the lower self to control the higher self. No, samsthabhyatmanam atmana, atmanam atmana, jahishatrum mahabaho. In this way you conquer the the lust. Now, all of this is very nicely explained in the purport of Srila Prabhupada. And if we have to come to that stage, samsthabhyatmanam atmanam atmana, which means one has steadied the intelligence by the soul, because soul is superior to the intelligence. Evam buddhe param buddhva, buddhe param buddhva, knowing this, it actually means coming to the stage of our existence at the soul level, and that is known as a transcendental position. Because at that position, when we live at the soul level, we are not affected by the forces of the mind senses, mind, and intelligence. And that is called a transcendental state. And Prabhupada is saying that coming to that transcendental state, when we are not affected by the forces of the mind or the forces of the lust residing in the senses, mind, and intelligence, is samstabhya. And that is the sum and substance of this chapter. I'll read this one. One may not give up work. This is the purport to the last verse. One may not give up work and prescribe duties all of a sudden. But by gradually developing Krishna consciousness, one can be situated in a transcendental position without being influenced by the material senses and the mind, by steady intelligence directed towards one's pure identity. Steady intelligence directed towards one's pure identity. Atmanam, Atmana, Samstabhyam. This is the sum total of this chapter. So, Krishna, right from the beginning in the 3rd chapter onwards, or even before that, Krishna is bringing this concept of becoming situated in the transcendental position. And to be situated in the transcendental position, one must become steady, samstabhyam, atmanam atmana. And that is why in another place, Prabhupada explains that if you see Rupa Goswami's description, adhau shraddha tata sadhu sangha atha bhajana kriya anartha nivritti syat tatha nishtaha. The result of anartha nivritti is nishtha. When one becomes freed from the unwanted desires in the material and being disturbed by those desires, one becomes nishtha. When one becomes nishtha, or in that nishtha stage, one has to become transcendental. And when nishtha is there, one develops asakti. And when one is developed asakti, bhava comes about. Those are the next stages. So from the beginning, all through in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is encouraging that we come to this transcendental state of existence. And in that state of existence, we are not disturbed by the senses, mind, and intelligence. And in that state of existence, real bhakti develops. And that is the sum and substance of the 3rd chapter of the Gita, as Prabhupada is explaining. So why, although we know Tamisra, Andha Tamisra, Raurava, all these hellish conditions are there, we hear about all this, but still we can become swayed because of the presence of lust, which is the enemy of the living entity. And how to control that, how to conquer that, it is by transcendental consciousness, by developing Krishna consciousness. That is the explanation given in these instructions of Krishna and the Vedic literatures. We'll stop here. Grantaraj Srimad-Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.